persona in the sea, feeling less wild, less light, less free, floating light, persona in the sea. Do you want me? Do you want me to believe in you? Just no matter I do. Do you want me? Do you want me to believe in you? Just no matter I do.
And we're live. Welcome back for another stream. How are we today? It's been a while since the last stream. We haven't gone live since the day FPL launched, so I thought it'd be a good time to check in again, see how we're all getting on with our teams and pre-season and so on. Let me know in chat if you can hear me. Hopefully everything's coming through fine. I do have my aircon on because it's roasting here, so hopefully it's not picking that up either. So yeah, Community Shield's just wrapped up. Man City beating Man United on pens, so lots to discuss there. And lots of teams played their last pre-season games today, so a lot to unpack there as well. And I'm joined by a good friend and a top FPL manager, FPL Fran. Can you hear me? How you doing, mate?
Yeah, I can hear you. So thank you for having me on. Just excited to have a small chat before Gameweek 1's close.
Yeah, so Fran kindly joining me. We're going to look through our current FPL drafts. We'll have a look at his draft. I've got a Haaland draft and a Salah draft, so I put a poll up as well just now. Haaland, Salah, both or neither, so get your votes in. It looks pretty divided at the moment. Which way are you leaning at the moment, Fran, in terms of your team?
I'm leaning Haaland right now, but I mean it's all pretty close. I think I'm still in the camp where I'd either go for a Haaland draft or a Salah only draft. Yeah,
I'm with you on that. I don't think I'll have both, to be fair. I think it's going to be one or the other. I think it kills your balance too much. So if I go, basically I think what I'll do, I don't know if you're the same, is I'll pair whichever premium I get with Saka. That's my second premium of choice at the moment. But I know a lot of people have got Son, who I think is the top pick. Turn down the voice sound. Is that my voice? Hang on, there we go. Yeah, I don't normally have guests on the stream. I literally dropped Fran a DM. I was like, you fancy joining me? And he was like, yeah, let's do it. Is that my voice or Fran's voice? How are we doing? By the way, welcome to the stream, Edzo, Virtual, Peter, Samir, Skildo, Esbam, Sean, British, Harry Football, Josh, Juice World, Arun Lad. Let us know in the chat, what do you think of the Community Shield? What did you think, Fran? Did you watch the game?
Yeah, I did watch the game. I thought United were great, good performance, built a lot of chances. I think I'm the one who's loud apparently, so you might just have to turn me down.
Yeah, there we go.
Awesome. But yeah, I mean, United looked great. I think the concern for me was when I was looking at Ahmad. It's exciting, I guess, as a Gameweek 1 pick, but then you see how fast Garnacho subbed in, and that already screams like a lot of risk there. And so the only United player I'm really looking at now, I guess, is just Bruno.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, did you see Bruno's goal? Oh, just offside.
Yeah,
absolute worldie. Oh my days. If he was on... He's too quiet now. All right, we'll get it right. I've turned him up a bit. Say something, Fran? Is that too loud now? Sorry. There we go.
Let's see how that goes.
Okay. Yeah, what a goal. Yeah, he cut inside, bent it round Edison. He was like leading the line today as well. Obviously, Højlund's injured. Xerxes, I think it was on the bench. I believe.
Yeah, I think Xerxes was said to be a little bit unfit, so he was unlikely to play this game.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't know about you, but when I'm picking my FPL players, I tend to pick those on set pieces, on penalties. I thought Bruno looked good. I thought Garnacho looked good when he came on. And as you say, for me, if I was ranking the 5 mils, I think I'd have Ahmed third right now. It's close between Bob and Ahmed, but I think Rodgers is probably the best 5 mil personally. I don't know if you saw, but while we were watching the game earlier, Carvalho to Brentford is a done deal, apparently. We've got the here we go from Fabrizio. So I think he's 5 mil. Let me know in chat if I'm mistaken. So he could be another interesting 5 mil. How would you rank the 5 mils at the moment, Fran?
I think same as you, really. But I guess it depends on what your sort of purpose is, right? If you're going for Bob, you kind of have to understand that his minutes can go really poorly, even as soon as game week 2, because you could see in the game KDB was a sub for Bob. Foden is going to join up with the team next week, so it might be the case that he'll lose minutes very quickly, and so you need to look at Bob almost as an eighth attacker. Whereas I guess with Rodgers,
Yeah.
the minutes look so good in the preseason so far, you don't have that risk, I would say, for now. And so it really depends on how you're planning with those sorts of players going forwards. Are you planning for Rodgers to play up until game week 6, or are you planning for Bob to play till game week 6? Because in that situation, I'd definitely go with Rodgers over that. But just for the opportunity to go for Bob versus Ipswich at home, I quite like him.
I mean, imagine if there's a leak as well, like he starts game week 2. You're absolutely laughing. But yeah, obviously it was a pretty rotated City side, even though they got the win today. Yeah, De Bruyne was on the bench, Foden not in the squad, Grealish injured. So yeah, there's that factor as well. But some people think it could be his breakout season. I don't know if he's going to be the next Palmer. I think it could be similar. Do you remember? I think it was Foden's first season. He was 5.5, and then he went all the way down to like 5.1. But he was getting like lots of minutes, but not many consistent starts. I think it'll be something like that. I think he's going to have some big scores in him, but too much of a rotation risk for me to consider. So yeah, I mean, I've got Rodgers right now in my draft, but as you say, if you're going for a 5 mil mid, it needs to be your 8th attacker. So someone for your bench or to rotate in, not someone to be starting every single week. Because yeah, although Rodgers has played the most pre-season minutes for Villa, I'm not confident that he's going to be starting every game for Villa. They have made a few signings despite Diaby going the opposite way. So yeah, get your questions in the chat. Any questions for Fran? Floxy says, I don't rate this team. What would you change? Let me pull up my Salah team and then let me know in chat which one you like more. So this one, the Haaland team, is Henderson, Trent, Hall, Porro, Eze, Saka, Nkunku, Bruno, Isak, João Pedro, and Haaland. João Pedro, by the way, did you see he scored just now, Fran?
Yeah, I saw that. I think he was subbed off at 45 minutes as well, but it's a good sign because we didn't see any of him in the preseason at all. So getting some minutes in his boots, you'd think not the best game in game week 1, but if you plan to hold him for a while, definitely a great pick. And did you see Minte scoring as well?
Yeah, 1 goal, 1 assist. He's flying. So they've played 4 preseason games. He's returned in every single game. 1 goal, 1 assist today. So, I mean, there's so many 5.5s to choose from. I believe Smith Rowe scored as well.
Yeah, and then obviously Murphy's had a great run of games too, so lots to decide.
Let us know in chat. Who's the best 5.5? So, what are the options, Fran? We've got Smith Rowe, Minte, Hudson-Odoi. Is there anyone else? Or those are the main 3?
I think that's
Andreas.
it.
I don't know if people are going Andreas now.
I'm a little bit lower on Andreas because it seems like he's actually actively linked with a move away. Maybe Elanga, but he's just very similar to Hudson-Odoi.
Murphy's come up a few times in the chat. He's been having a great preseason. Kamada, yeah, good shout. And who was the other one here? Brereton Diaz.
Oh, there could be Semenyo, right? If Solanke's left, and you might envision some forward minutes for him, there could be an angle there.
Well, let's talk about Solanke then. I'm interested to get your thoughts. What do you think of the Solanke signing? Is he going to be a factor? I've got a graphic I'll pull up.
I think so, just because the fixtures are better for Spurs at the start, and the Ange comments are so good in terms of him being ready to play. I know we heard that there was a toe injury, but that seems to be a little bit more transfer related than anything. So if he starts in game week 1, we think his minutes are good. Richarlison's also, I don't think he's featured in the preseason yet, so that's a good sign for his minutes. But then you'll have to probably question whether he's still on penalties and whether the minutes, I guess, are still there at the same level as they were when he was a Bournemouth player.
Yeah, Richarlison, I think he's got an injury, so he's going to miss the first couple of game weeks or so. So he might not be back till like game week 2 or 3, I think. But yeah, there's an interesting quote actually from Ange earlier as well. I don't know if you saw that, Fran, but he remarked on Van der Ven last season. They signed him, and that was a few days before the start of the season, and he came in straight into the starting 11 and he hit the ground running, was what Ange said. So I think it's basically alluding to the fact that Solanke is going to be straight in the team. That's the intention from game week 1. Yeah, Kulusevski's done well in pre-season. Obviously, Richarlison out injured, I believe. So yeah, I think it's an interesting option for 7.5. You'd imagine he'd get more goals playing for a better team and a better attack, but it doesn't always play out that way. But do you see this as a good thing for Son's prospects, or negative, or indifferent on that one, Fran?
I think a bit indifferent, but you'd have to imagine that's basically confirming that we'll see Son permanently at left wing. And I think just looking at some of his underlying data, he's a little bit more, XA dominant compared to XG dominant when he's a left winger. So then I know some people naturally think Son is a better left winger, but in terms of converting to FPL, there's less of a goal threat there. So I don't think anything's changed, because it seemed like Ange for this season has already determined that Son is less likely to play center forward. I think before Solanke was signed, he was saying that Kulusevski was the only player who could play in the 9 spot, right? So I'm still quite high on Son because I think he's on pens, but not thinking he's better than someone like Saka, who you have in your drafts right now, for example.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think Solanke is going to be a good fit at Spurs. He likes to play with his back to goal, good hold-up play. It sounds crazy, but I think he might actually even help them from a defensive perspective, because his ability to hold up play, rather than just go back, forth, losing the ball. So I actually think he could even help them defensively, which sounds a bit crazy for a striker signing. But yeah, I think he's going to be a good fit. So a lot of people want to see your team, Fran. So let's bring up Fran's team. And I'm interested to get all your thoughts on the picks if you run us through the team. I'll read it out first. So he's got Henderson in goal. He's got Trent, Porro and Hull. His midfield is Nkunku, Saka, Bruno and Eze. He's got João Pedro, Isak and Haaland. And then his bench is Fabianski, Munoz, Barker and Winks. What I can say is he had Armstrong until about an hour ago. And then João Pedro was starting and he swapped him in. And of course João Pedro scored. So yeah, can you talk us through your team, Fran, and the players you've picked and why?
Yeah, sure. I'll also preface that we had that change for Armstrong for João Pedro before he scored. So
yeah, he did.
No,
I'll give him that one. Yeah.
But yeah, I think on a Haaland draft, it is tight, right? You'll probably notice the bench is quite light. I've got Winks here at the start because I'm a lot more keen on having Isak within the team, and then João Pedro. Not the best games to start until game week 4, but it's that question of whether you prefer him or Armstrong. And given that he's also on pens, plays for a much better team, I quite like João Pedro a bit more if I think he's fit. And given that he started today, played 45 minutes, I'm a little bit leaning towards just going for João Pedro over Armstrong. In the midfield, probably the only controversial pick is Bruno. But then looking at him, for example, the Community Shield, playing in some advanced spots. I'm not saying he'll stay there because, as you said, Højlund will come back and Xerxes will get more minutes, but generally a little bit higher on United, I suppose, this season than last. And as you said, set pieces, penalties, these sorts of things are always really nice. So I like Bruno, and the guarantee of minutes is always there. In defense, no Guardiola is probably something that people find quite controversial. I'm sort of angling for a bit of a wildcard 6 here, so I feel like that's why my draft is a little bit lighter on Arsenal and City players than most. And when you look at, let's say, the run-up of games for City, yes, of course, there's Ipswich, which I'll be missing for someone like Guardiola, but I think Porro has some pretty good games to start. And we're already seeing someone like Porro do really well in the preseason, continuing to be in really good attacking positions. I don't think much has changed there. So it will be about Munoz too, because that 0.5 is what I've decided to spend in the team. So where I think a lot of people have Trent Guardiola, I've decided to take that 0.5 out to get Munoz. So a little bit strong at the back still, and then Hall for game week 1, but then hoping that he'll be a pretty competent auto sub option. And that's it. I'd say Henderson, I would say most people think is the starting goalkeeper. So it was a question about him maybe versus Flecken or Sells, but seems like we've got more confidence on knowing that Henderson's the number 1 over, let's say, the Nottingham Forest goalkeeper. And then comparing to Flecken, it's hard to buy into those Flecken fixtures to start. There's 2 good home ones on game weeks 1 and 3, but yeah, given that I'm sort of playing loosely towards wildcard 6 or whatever happens, trying to be flexible around that, I quite like Henderson to start anyways.
Yeah, for context, Johnston, the other Palace keepers, asked for a move away. So, it sounds very much like Henderson's going to be the undisputed number 1. Unless, of course, they go and sign someone like Ramsdale, which I suppose isn't impossible.
Right.
But yeah, so I've got lots of questions about the team. So can you talk us through the Hall pick? I think he's unbelievably low owned, 4.5 mil. I think he's barely 2% owned. What's the thinking with the Hall pick?
Did I catch that you have him as well?
I do, yeah, I've got him as well, but I'm just interested to hear why you've got him and if it's the same reasons.
I think it's in the past we've seen a huge preference for Burn, even at left back over Hull, but sometimes I tend to think with the manager of preseason can tell a little bit more about how important a player can be, and Hull starting so many of the preseason games, getting full 90-minute games in his legs, just makes me think that it's likely that he could play as the starting left back, even maybe over Burn. And then I think we've also heard news that Newcastle have been trialing a back five, so that gives me even more confidence there in going for Hull. But yeah, extremely attacking player, and I don't really see anything wrong with him as a 4.5 defender to start. Because if you look at my draft, he also falls probably into the bench quite often. So it's all about game week 1 for me, where I think he very well can start.
So my only thought here then, so in terms of rotating players, you've got Hall, who's got Spurs game week 3. You've got Munoz, but so I assume the plan is to start Munoz away at Chelsea and bench Hall. And then you've also got, obviously, Porro playing against Newcastle away. And then you've got João Pedro game week 3 away to Arsenal as well. So are you worried at all about your bench depth there, or are you just going to start those players regardless of the tougher fixtures?
Yeah, so game week 3 is definitely an ugly week for the team, but I don't think there's too much I can do to avoid that. There's obviously other forwards who have better fixtures if I spend the 0.5 million there, but quite happy with, just looking at game week 3 as a week where I'll probably get a red arrow or expect poor results elsewhere. Exactly, yeah.
Thanks for the super chat, Nicola Goatkitch. Says, Haaland reminded me of why I hated owning him last year. So that's the other massive decision here. You've gone Haaland, no Salah. Some people have got both, some people are Salah only. I think even having neither is viable. So how have you landed on a Haaland draft?
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, why don't we start with neither first? I think I generally consider neither if Foden was fit to start the season, but then because he's not, I don't love the sort of no premium drafts without Foden, or a fit Foden at least. And then going back to making that decision between Haaland and Salah, I do think game week 2 is this big significant aspect of that, because if you look at Salah, generally speaking, you can feel comfortable captaining him in every fixture between game weeks 1 to 6, but you have to imagine that Ipswich game is really where there's a big swing. And then there's the question of what you raised, which is, can someone like Saka deliver close to Salah? And I think that's possible when you look at some of the sort of projections that have been shared by someone like Rob T on Twitter.
You know what? I'm glad you mentioned it. I've got that exact graphic.
Great, yeah, why don't we have a look at that?
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? So, yeah, the markets have started doing points projections over the season. And what's really interesting here, we've got Haaland, Salah and Saka basically dead even. 225 points for Haaland and Salah over the season. Saka a couple of points behind them on the latest projections. But, yeah, obviously, it's all about owning these players in the right order. So your view is essentially that there's more to be gained by going Haaland initially. And then you mentioned a Game Week 6 wildcard. Before I ask you about that, Otterer says, is Kwanzaa a good pick to start the season? Thanks for the super chat. Yeah, he's an interesting one. 4.5. Obviously, Van Dijk's not back in the squad. I think he is just back in training now. Don't think he's played in pre-season. Last pre-season friendly, Kwanzaa started right centre-back, Kanate left, and Van Dijk's position is the left. So I am wondering if that's a hint that we might see Kwanzaa as a 4.5 mil route into Liverpool's defence. I'd say he's better with his feet, more press-proven sort of player. My view is, I think he does start game week 1, but there could be some rotation there. Do you have any thoughts on Kwanzaa, Fran?
No, I think my thoughts are exactly the same as you. It seems like he's a little bit ahead in the pecking order, and you could even argue the same with, let's say, Harvey Elliott in that sort of 10 spot right now. But then it's how guaranteed the minutes are after game week 1, and that's the big question.
So what was you mentioned you're going to wildcard game week 6, that's your current plan. What's the thinking in terms of wildcard in that specific game week?
I think when you look at my team, and given the lack of, let's say, City, Arsenal defense, even let's say in Odegaard, for example, the Arsenal fixtures do become very good after game week 5, and then the City fixtures become good in game week 7. So I guess in the interest of not missing out another amazing Arsenal fixture after the Wolves at home one, I see it as a good opportunity to maybe go for a draft that The premiums aside is basically very light on City and Arsenal, but still strong. Has players like Isak, Bruno, maybe Trent, and then a good opportunity to jump off some of these players on game week 6 when those Arsenal and City fixtures get better around that timeline. And taking into account maybe this season, I feel like even though we've got the 5 free transfers, I generally like the idea of maybe trying to wildcard whilst also saving a lot of the free transfers, and then maybe saving those free transfers as we go on to attack the back half of game weeks 1 to 19. And then just looking at that as my insurance, as opposed to maybe in the past where some people would just hold on to that wild card as insurance.
Yeah. Just look at the ticker here and I can see what you're saying. So you got game week 6, you got Newcastle against Man City, Arsenal here, back-to-back home games against promoted side Leicester and Southampton. So yeah, absolute no-brainer. You triple up on your wild card on Arsenal, I imagine, whether that's Havertz, Saka, a defender or 2 defenders. Maybe Ødegaard would be viable then. We'll have to see. Makes a lot of sense, yeah. And you're saying you'd probably move off Liverpool, would you? They're away to Wolves game week 6. Is that the other team you'd potentially hop off?
Yeah, potentially. I mean, look, Liverpool versus Wolves is still a good fixture, right? But I probably would see it as an opportunity to jump off, just in view of Arsenal and other teams like City.
And by the way, if anyone knows what they're talking about, it's Fran. Where did you come last season, Fran?
Finished top 500, so around 437 in the world.
437th in the world. He's got his own YouTube channel. I'm sure you'll know him already, but if you're not subscribed, go check him out, FPL Fran. What I should have done, actually, I'll do it after the stream, is put your channel in the description. Actually, I did tag you, so I think they can get to it from that.
I think you have, so people can just click on that button on the description.
Click that to get
Appreciate that.
Yeah, no worries. So, yeah, I like the team. So Brighton played, I think, their last pre-season friendly today. It was João Pedro's first minutes. Barco started, which is good. Minte started, 1 goal, 1 assist for him. Any concerns at all about Barco longer term, or is that again something you're just going to look to resolve on the wild card if need be?
Yeah, I think there's definite concerns about him, but I gotta say that my draft has 4 serviceable defenders, so I think I'm quite happy with how they rotate in amongst each other. I have thought about maybe going, let's say, Minte over João Pedro, right? Because if you look at the team, there's a 5.5 spot, and if I'm a little bit lower on someone like Pedro's minutes, then he can just be replaced by Minte, who's been fit, playing a lot of preseason minutes. And then with Barco, I kind of just wanted the opportunity really of getting maybe game week 4 versus Ipswich at home. I know we've got some different news about Estupiñán. Some people rumoring that he'll be back at the end of August. Some people saying September, October. But you'd have to imagine he has to build match fitness too, and that's not just throwing him into an immediate start. So given the timeline, I think if we can get maybe Barco versus Ipswich at home in game week 4, that covers a really bad Pedro Porro fixture that I have in my team when he faces off versus Arsenal. So that's kind of why I've still stuck with Barco. But there's some interesting 4.0 defenders. I don't know if you've looked into it, but the Aston Villa right back today, who's played a few preseason minutes, is also 4.0.
Ah, okay. So was Konsa centre back?
Yeah, I think it was a Konsa power back line, if I'm not wrong, because it seems like Diego Carlos might be leaving the club.
Ah, okay. Yeah, I mean, the one I've got at the moment is Greaves. I've just put my team on stream, and by the way, I should caveat, absolutely didn't copy Fran. So when I messaged him for his team a couple of hours ago, the first thing I said back was, oh my god, my team's very, very similar. I think we've actually got the same starting 11. It's just the bench. So I've gone for Rodgers. Yeah. I think you went for Winks. And what's the other change? I think I went Konsa.
Yep.
Who did you have again?
I have Munoz.
Munoz, that was it. So you had Munoz and Winks. So I just spread the money around a bit more on the bench. So like when João Pedro is away to Arsenal game week 3, I could start Rodgers or Konsa, and I've got that option as well with Hull, who's got Spurs game week 3. So that was why I did that. In terms of bench depth, the other thing at the back of my head is the possibility to roll extra transfers. Has this at all affected your thinking this season? Do you have a plan to roll, or do you think it's not actually going to make much of an impact at all this season?
Yeah, I do think, the 5 free transfers is a bit of a pipe dream, but then I think there will be some situations at the start of the season where some people will get on to 3 free transfers, and then depending on whether you're a bit more of a patient manager or someone who's a bit more risk seeking, you'll decide when it's the right time for you to start using your bank of free transfers. And I think that's the big change this season that we'll probably see, and it comes down to your managerial preferences. I think I'm still a little bit more risk seeking, so if I see an opportunity to use 2 free transfers, but then maybe roll my last one if I was saving 3 free transfers, that would probably be what I would tend to do over the course of the season. But I don't know what your thoughts are. Do you think it has an impact on bench depth?
Yeah, I agree with you in that. I think it's a pipe dream, like having 5 free transfers. Like, there are times, don't get me wrong, like in every season where you've got 2 free transfers and you end up making a move just for the sake of it to not burn it, because you can always find something for your bench. So I'd like to think I can get to 3 or 4 at a push, but yeah, I don't think it's going to have a huge impact. What is massive is that the wildcard and free hit don't wipe out your free transfers anymore. So let's say you manage to roll a fair few over the opening weeks, and then you do go ahead with the wildcard 6 plan. You'll have all those roll transfers on top of that, which is huge. Because again, if you wildcard, the plan is not to spend transfers immediately. So you could wildcard Gameweek 6, not make transfers for another couple of weeks, and then maybe you will have 4 or 5 free transfers, which again is like really powerful because you can change a lot with that many transfers. So yeah, right now I think if you're quite an analytical manager, if you run solves on FPL review, it suggests not making transfers for like the opening 5 straight game weeks. So I think that's optimistic, but yeah, we'll see. I've got a super chat here from Sartak. He says, what do you think about my draft? He's got Flecken, Saliba, Vardy, Anderson, Salah, Saka, Murphy, De Bruyne, Isak, Wood and Solanke, and then his bench is a 4-mil keeper in Nkunku, Barco and another 4-mil defender. So De Bruyne's an interesting one. Obviously he's on the bench today, came on really late, like 89th minute or something. I do think he's a genuine option. I don't know, what do you think about De Bruyne, Fran? Is he an actual realistic option, especially with Foden, not in the squad at all today, or do you think he's a minute's risk?
I think he's a small minutes risk, but not really because that he'll be frequently rotated or anything, but just at his age and the amount of injuries that he's suffered from, you'd imagine that those kind of things would be a bit more reoccurring. But if once again you're targeting the start of the season, you're going for some nice games with KDB and picking him before Champions League and more rotation is going to happen. I guess I don't love KDB because I still think he's prone to being a little bit of an earlier sub, whereas last season we saw Foden play close to 90 minutes a game. I still think even if you have KDB starting, are you expecting close to 90 when he was a bit younger, or something like him playing 75 minutes, 80 minutes, and then being subbed off? So I feel like the pricing has helped because you now have a genuine question to ask, but I think with being burned from frequently injured players in the past and not wanting to have minutes risk, I'm a little bit lower in KDB than I would be in any other season, I suppose, where he'd be fit to start.
Yeah, I mean, other than that, I really like the team. I personally don't hate the KDB pick, but the problem is you've got 2 4-mil defenders on your bench, so any issues and suddenly, let's say Vardy's bench misses a game, or Anderson gets an injury, suddenly you're forced to start a 4-mil defender. So personally, I would probably spread the money around a bit more, whether that's going Solanke to a cheaper forward, or you could do De Bruyne to Bruno, who me and Fran have both got, and then you spend that money to upgrade the bench, like that second 4-mil defender to Munoz, or you could go 2 4.5s. But yeah, other than that, solid team. Edzo says, isn't Mbumo being overlooked, or are the fixtures too difficult? Any thoughts on Mbumo, Fran?
Point. It seems like Tony's ready to start the season, so then I guess the dream of Mbumo being on penalties isn't there to start with. But if you're actually, let's say, going for a Game Week 4 wildcard, and suddenly you're just only looking at the first 3 fixtures for Brentford, they're actually quite good, because even though they do play teams like City and Liverpool early on, if you go for a bit of an early wild card, which I think has been quite popular with some people, you're still going to get Crystal Palace at home, Southampton at home, and Game Weeks 1 and 3, so it could work out. But I think Mbumo is a bit more of a wait and see. Maybe if someone like Tony gets transferred out, I'd be a little bit more keen on him. what do you think about Carvalho? Because he could play some more minutes, and then he'd be a 5 million, I guess, Brentford attacker.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose he comes straight into the team. I don't know loads about him, if I'm honest. I know he's highly rated, and Liverpool fans says he's like a Coutinho regen. Yeah, I think he's a wait and see for me. I mean, it's hard to overlook Rodgers when he's the same price and he's played the most pre-season minutes of all Villa players. So for me, I'd probably start with Rodgers and then look elsewhere. I do think Rodgers is going to get by far the most starts out of the 5 mils. Carvalho is a bit of a question mark for me. I think Bob's an awesome option, but I think, again, once City get going, game week 2 or 3, Pep's got way too many options at his disposal, so I think his minutes are going to be super low. So you mentioned, we're talking about De Bruyne and minutes. Do you tend to pick players consciously that are generally get 90 minutes?
I wouldn't say so. I like last season, I probably actually owned João Pedro or Richarlison a couple more times than most other people would, especially those who are maybe analytically inclined. I tend to go for players that I'm absolutely sure of that they're important enough to start, and if let's say they're at a really good price, like let's say Smith Rowe, I might not necessarily say that he's a 90-minute player to start, but it seems like, you know, given the money spent on the buy, the lack of depth they have in attacking positions, he's probably going to play something like 75-80 minutes a game to start, and for me that's good enough if I think Smith Rowe is a good pick, right? So I don't necessarily need players to be 90-minute players, but with KDB there's always the risk, I suppose, where, as you said, City have so many good players at their disposal. Is it possible at times where he doesn't need to play more minutes, and that's the issue. I feel like, is there that much upside to the KDB minutes, or are you just looking at an average of 65, 70?
And in terms of Game Week 1 captaincy, I've just stuck a poll up. I'm going to pull up the review projections. Are you on Isak captain, Fran?
I think I am, but then I suppose I might also have to consider whether I think Saka will start and play the full 90. That seems unlikely.
I mean, he probably plays like 80. I think the review's about right here. 84 they've got him on. Which makes it super close. So Isak's on 7, Salah and Saka 6.9, Haaland 6.2. I feel like last season was the same thing, was it not? Where Saka was top on review, and some people went there. I know Jonas went there. Remember when I did the video of him, he just followed the top suggestion and he captained Saka game at 1. But yeah, it looks neck and neck right now. Get your votes in on the captain poll in terms of who you're going for. So yeah, if I go for a Haaland draft, it's actually going to be Isak captain. But I don't know how much you've watched of Chelsea in pre-season, Fran, but they've looked wide open at the back. They're clearly still like learning the system. They've been dominated a few times. I've been watching them. Even Celtic looked way better. Quite a few defensive mistakes. So I do think a team like City can cause them a lot of problems pressing from the front. So I don't hate the Haaland captaincy either, and I might even be swayed.
That's a good point. I tend to also look at things like home and away, and even though City absolutely blew apart Chelsea within their own last fixture in pre-season, I'll probably lean towards the fixture there with Southampton at home for Isak.
I'm going to do my vote on the poll as well. So Salah's winning the poll, you know. So this is, I mean, like you said earlier, going both Haaland and Salah, I think kills your team too much. But I look at this, and it is worrying going without Salah game week 1. But I'm sure those that go Salah and no Haaland are going to be feeling the same sentiment game week 2. So Salah 53%, then Isak 31%. Haaland 12%, 4% other. So if anyone voted other, let us know in the chat who did you vote for. S-Bam says Gandhi rules, Salah's got the early kickoff. I think Gandhi's rule has been disproven many times. Do you factor that into your captaincy, Fran, Gandhi's rule?
No, but I do enjoy a Twitter post or two about Gandhi's rule.
Yeah. I mean, FPL Martin's like unmatched for FPL memes. Keep your questions coming if you've got any questions for myself or Fran. Will Jebison start for Bournemouth as Solanke's left? It's possible. I think it'd be Jebison or Semenyo, but they'll definitely sign a replacement. They don't go into the season without a better strike. No disrespect to Jebison, but they'll definitely sign a replacement to Solanke rather than go this whole season with just Jefferson leading the line, I would imagine. But yeah, he's 4.5, so he is an interesting option. It doesn't look like there's only going to be any 4.5s that are starters, right, Fran? Unless you've spotted any.
Yeah, I think not out and out starters at least.
Yeah. Keep your questions coming. Hall or Mikalenko? I've got Hall personally. I mean, I've been saying in videos, I think he could be on for a breakout season. It was annoying, and I know Newcastle fans feel the same. It was annoying how much Burn was using left back, and that is still a worry for me. That is possible. I think it could be Burn in centre back and Hall left back. Right back's hard to call if Trippier sticks around. Maybe they'll rotate Livramento and Trippier, but I just think Hall, absolute class play. He's been immense in pre-season. He's got a few attacking returns. Home to Southampton. I think it's just a fixture to target, and he's a cheap pick to take on that risk, I suppose, in terms of minutes going forward. But if it goes wrong, I've got Conte on my bench anyway, who I'd be pretty comfortable starting, from game week 3 onwards if need be, all the way up to game week 9 if I don't wildcard before then. So yeah, that's why I've got Hall myself.
Yeah, I think I'm pretty much in agreement with you there.
Yeah. How can we make it see the next 5 fixtures at the bottom of each player? There's a browser add-on called FPL Tools. It adds the fixtures under the players. I think you can get it on Chrome and Firefox. So there's that. Why are people ignoring Jacob Murphy? I mean, it might be a fair question. I think he started like 12 in a row at the end of last season. Barnes was injured for parts of that. And I suppose people are just worried, will he rotate with Barnes? Maybe he won't. Maybe his first choice. He's got the pre-season form to back it up. Yeah, I try to be careful with pre-season form. Like, it is super helpful, but you have to be careful as well. Like, do you remember Anderson at Newcastle last season? He absolutely flew in pre-season. He got like 5 goals, 3 assists or something, and he was like never really a factor in Newcastle's team. So
yeah, I mean, even if you look at Liverpool now, Carvalho had a great pre-season. He's just been sold. So
yeah. Keep your questions coming if you've got any more. Can you rate the 4.5 mil defenders? 4.5 mil defenders. So who are the options there, Fran? We've got Hull, Anderson, Konsa,
Dunk, Colwell.
Colwell. How would you rate them in order? I'm just going to go blow my nose. We'll be back in 2 secs.
Yeah, go for it. I'd probably say Hall is the one that I like the most because such good game week 1 fixture, and if you can get it right in terms of getting an attacking fullback, then I quite like it because Newcastle have great games up until game week 5 effectively. But then if you're going for a 4.5 defender who's just going to cover you some fixtures, then let's say if you go for Konsa, you can kind of just ignore game week 2, and these sorts of players like Mikalenko, Konsa are all quite similar to me, and Anderson as well.
I mean, Leif Davies as well. Chris Bennett says Leif Davies. He's someone I'm looking at closely. I think he's going to be in a lot of our teams at some point for 4.5. I think he got 19 assists, 2 goals in the Championship last season. So he's a really interesting one. And Ipswich have got a nice run of games from Game Week 3. So yeah, he's someone that might end up, if I wildcard Game Week 4 or 6, those are kind of the fixture swings I'm looking at. If I go for either of those and he starts well, he's someone firmly on my radar. It's quite a nice run of games overall from Game Week 3 all to like Game Week 16. So yeah, we'll have to see if we can translate that to the Premier League. I don't imagine he'll do even half the output of last season, but Doughty ended up in our teams, or lots of our teams last season. Similar role in the team, playing down the left, bombs forward, takes some set pieces. In Davis's case, he takes corners both sides and some set pieces. So loads of routes to points there with him. So yeah, he's an interesting one, but not for me Game Week 1. I mean, Johnson's played the most minutes in pre-season for Ipswich of all their players. New signing from West Ham, 4 mil. So I think initially I'd rather start with someone like Greaves or Johnson rather than go for Davies straight off the bat and then perhaps see how they get on. Who do you think goes back down this season, Fran? Let us know in chat as well. Who's getting relegated this season?
I think I'm going to be a bit lame here and just say all the promoted teams are most likely to go down again. But I do think Wolves, especially even selling Neto again, I'd find it hard to believe that they don't come close to getting relegated unless they sign a lot more players.
That's a big shout. I don't know about Wolves. I fancy them to do maybe like mid-table. Andre in the chat, by the way. Shout out to Andre. He's the guy I've been building my website with. If anyone doesn't know, but we've been working on an app as well, which is coming before Gameweek 1. We're so nearly there. Like, it's coming on iPhone and Android. It's completely free. Don't ask me how much money I'm bleeding on this, but yeah, it does loads of stuff like your live rank, bonus points, fixtures, like top 10k, and all sorts. And we're nearly there with it, so sit tight, keep an eye out for that when that announcement comes. Probably be like Tuesday, Wednesday. Keep your questions coming if you've got any more for myself or Fran. Yeah, any other thoughts from the Manchester derby, the Community Shield today, Fran?
I think a lot of people mentioned it in chat, but I enjoyed seeing Ross or FPL Raptor on quite a fair bit on the broadcast. But maybe we can talk about Bob. I think he had a great game again, looked very active in the first half, and then eventually got the assist in open play too for Bernardo's goal. He's the one where I think if you have opportunity once again as to have an eighth attacker, and you really are comfortable with the other 7, no matter what. Like, let's say if Bob can't even feature after game week 2, Man City do play early in game week 2, so if you can get a leak potentially, like, he's interesting. But there wasn't too much. I think the point about Savinho being there, the amount of depth that the team has, that's always really worrying because
yeah, he looked sharp as well. I thought Savinho, not a bad debut off the bench. Yeah, looks like a wavy sort of player, kind of like Doku in terms of the way his explosive pace. Yeah, I thought he looked good actually. Looks like a good signing. So yeah, for me, I don't see myself going Gameweek 1 with Bob, but I don't hate it either. You know, especially if as I say, if there's a leak he starts against Ipswich Gameweek 2, then I think you're laughing with a 5 mil City attacker. Question on Watkins from QKA plus U0. He says, "Hey man, what do you think of Watkins for the first 2 game weeks? He's not played a single minute pre-season. I'm thinking to swap him with Bruno Fernandes." Yeah, so he's not played a single minute. Wasn't in the squad today for Villa's final pre-season game. I've gone a bit cold on Watkins, despite him being the top scoring forward. I've been looking elsewhere personally in pretty much all my drafts. Do you share that sentiment on Watkins, Fran?
Yeah, I think when the game launched, I probably actually had him in my first draft. But then when you think about how it's still, away fixture to start than Arsenal, you can probably still get some players with better value for money in terms of better fixtures. And if he's not going to start game week 1-2, which I think it's a genuine concern now because he's not played a single preseason minute, then that's even worse. So why not think about keeping an open mind to going for Watkins like game week 3 or 4 if you really want to do so. But to start the season, I'm probably cold.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, their fixtures are nice, if you do wait a few weeks. So I think I'd rather do that and see if he can maintain his numbers from last season, because it was like a massive overperformance in terms of expected assists. Let's see if I can... How many assists did he get? Do you remember?
Think so. The FPL assists was it 17 or 19? What
I will say is FPL assists aren't factored into expected assists, but he got 18 assists from 4.02 expected assists. So that, that's one of the biggest overperformances I've ever seen. But yeah, FPL assists aren't factored into Opta's expected assists. So stuff like save shots and winning penalties and that sort of thing. But yeah, even then, for me, he's a wait and see at 9 mil, and I'll look to pick him up maybe like game week 4. One thing I have considered actually is taking a mil or even 0.5 in the bank into game week 1, and then just leaving the option to go, Isak to Watkins or Bruno to Foden, a couple of weeks in. Is that something you're considering or ever have considered, Fran?
Yeah, I think saving that 0.5 could be quite helpful, because you have a lot of players like even the 5.5s. Like if we use Minte as an example, if you start the game with like a Rodgers at 5.0 and Brighton's fixtures aren't very good anyways, who knows if you wait a few weeks, you find out if players like Bob or Ahmad are nailed or not nailed, you can then just jump onto someone like Minte if he looks really good and has good fixtures anyways. So there's always sort of launch pads that a 0.5 can help give you. But I think if your money is well spread in all the positions, I'd imagine you don't necessarily need to consider having that much money in the bank to start. But it's always something that I think managers decide on really based on if they're really worried about missing out on a player. I remember, if you recall, when a lot of us were deciding between, was it Bailey and another player to start the season?
Don't remind me.
But I think a lot of people were I mean, that was a cost saving 0.5. I can't remember who the other pick was, but
wasn't it Neto?
Yeah, I think it was Neto, and so then you're deciding between whether you want to save that 0.5, and that could mean a lot to a lot of managers. But we have a lot of options and choice at the start of the season. I'm finding it tough to actually save the 0.5.
Yeah, me too. That was such a strange season. I remember the cheap midfielders were just non-existent, so a lot of people ended up taking a back five of like premium defenders into Gameweek 1, and people were burning transfers for fun. Because there was just nowhere to go, like the opening 4 or 5 game weeks. I remember like FPL Salah, like he made his first transfer in like game week 5. So yeah, I think they've nailed the pricing this year. But yeah, if we get a similar situation ever again, it's going to be super interesting from there on, because we'll have the extra transfers this time as opposed to just burning them for no reason. Is Hall nailed at left back? I would say he's not totally nailed, but I think he's such massive upside. For me, he's worth taking a risk on, and it's a cheap risk for 4.5. So that's why I've picked him up. He's looked great in pre-season. He's popping up centrally, inverting. He got an assist yesterday, and I don't know what he was doing there, but he was in the box, flicked a header on, and I think it was Murphy buried it. So yeah, he's not playing like your traditional left back, so I think he's super attacking. Yeah, it was a 21-22 season, David. That was it. Yeah, there was just no cheap mids at all. I think Bailey was 4.5 mil, Neto was 5 mil, but neither of them did anything. Which is funny, by the way, because like they've both done pretty decently since then. So we were in the right line of thinking, but just we're a bit unlucky with those points. I suppose I should ask, are there any players that you think's a trap game week 1, Fran?
Maybe Watkins. I guess you're going back to that, but
yeah. I mean, that's a bold one, Watkins being a trap, but yeah, maybe. I mean, away at West Ham are going under the radar a bit with the amount of good misses they've done. I think they've just signed Wan-Bissaka. They've signed Somerville, Fulkrug. Like, they've added some good depth, Kilman as well. So yeah, might not be an easy game away, game week 1, and then of course it's Arsenal. After that, I like the fixtures. For me, I'd say trap's more like the serious rotation risk. Don't get me wrong, for someone like Jota, if he's starting every game, he's an absolute gem. But I do fear the Liverpool attackers, because there's like 4 people competing for 2 spots. So for me personally, it's Salah or no one. So this is going to come back to haunt me saying this, but I think the Liverpool attackers like Gakpo, Diaz, Darwin, Jota are all too risky for me. Would you agree with that, Fran?
No, I think you're right, because all these players will score, and the question is going to be, are you happy with either getting a crazy return, but then also knowing that that player can be benched in 2 weeks' time? So you could probably pick 1 out of 4 of the Liverpool attackers, and you could get the minutes somewhat right, but then you could also just get no returns, and then someone like Jota can come off the bench in a game and just score 1 goal, 1 assist. And I think it's very hard to sort of pick FPL players if you can't guarantee the minutes somewhat. And even if Carvalho's gone, still, as you say, with Salah nailed, you've got 2 spots for 4 players right now, and that's tricky.
Yeah, I agree with that. EAFC Freddy says Smith Rowe is 100% the best 5.5 million option in his opinion. Would you agree with that, or would you say there's anyone that's better for 5.5 mil in midfield?
I think from a game week 1 perspective, I tend to agree. Season long, I might say that someone like Minte could be interesting, or if we see, as I said, Semenyo certainly play a lot more centre forward minutes, and that could change. But to start the season, I can't see why he wouldn't be the best one to look at.
Yeah, I'd say he probably is as well. I love him, and I'm gutted, by the way, from an Arsenal fan perspective to see him go. But I think he's an awesome pick for 5.5, and I would say he's probably my favourite now. And then maybe Minte, but yeah, the opening 3 are pretty horrendous. So I'd probably say Smith Rowe's first. Then I'd say Minte. I didn't see much of the Brighton game. They were streaming it on their website, which was really cool. So I had it like dual screened with the Community Shield, and he's an absolute live wire. Sort of player that can easily come up with a couple of returns, and he could be a He could be the next Palmer, but I don't think he will be. I don't think there's ever going to be anything as ridiculous as Palmer 5 mil last season. But
Yeah,
wait, let us
you'd
know
have
in
to
chat.
give
Who's the
him-
next Palmer? Sorry, Frank, go on.
No, that's right. I was gonna say you'd have to give him penalties too, which is.
Yeah, I don't see that happening. So did you say João Pedro came off at half time?
Yeah.
Okay, because I saw Welbeck score a penalty, and then I just thought, oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, exactly.
But,
Yeah, I think they were just managing his minutes. A couple players
Yeah.
came off at around 60 minutes, but Minte played close to the full game, I believe.
Are you worried about that at all? Because I think that was their
Yeah.
last pre-season game before game
Yeah,
one.
it's not good look for João Pedro for Game Week 1. It's not a great fixture either, which is why I was sort of saying maybe I would consider going for a Smith Rowe instead or a Minte instead in Game Week 1, because you can guarantee the minutes a bit more. Because João Pedro's upside is penalties, but you also have to be on the pitch and all these other things. So it seems like because they actually have a lot of depth in the team that they can sort of manage his minutes as we go along. But that's not great if I'm considering him as my out and out starter. So yeah, I'm actually thinking about just going for Smith Rowe instead.
Yeah. Like, I reckon he probably starts Game Week 1, but it also wouldn't be surprising if his minutes are heavily managed, off at half time or, off just before 60, for example. The other approach I've gone for here is, so you went for Munoz, I've got Consa there, and then I've gone for Rodgers over Winks. So yeah, that's the other way to do it, is just moving Winks up to a Rodgers, for example, who I'm way more confident starts and gets better minutes than João Pedro at Game Week 1, who is away at West Ham, of course. But yeah, then Game Week 2, like, if João Pedro's looking fine, you can start him home to United. I don't mind that as a fixture at all. But yeah, it's all those combinations. It's difficult, isn't it?
Yeah, I think you're right, because it's not everyone has a great game Week 1, so it feels odd. Like Fulham, you'd say the entire run is good, but then maybe Game Week 1's the toughest one, and I guess the same applies to João Pedro, Everton away. So it's not like there are definitively better combinations, and we're losing assets too. Like I think Gibbs White, he's just lost some of the set pieces in the preseason, so we're kind of thinning down on some midfield picks.
Benjamin says he'd go for Havertz over Saka for the opening fixtures. Now, I've had Havertz in lots of drafts, and he's one player that I desperately want to squeeze in here, but I just don't have a way to afford him. I'm interested to know your thoughts on Havertz, Fran, because last season when he was moved to striker, it was unbelievable. I think he blanked in 2 games or 3 games in like the last 12 game weeks. So I think he's an awesome pick. But Arteta has been singing Jesus' praises, and he's not been playing particularly bad. Do you think Havertz is an option, or do you have worries like he might play midfield from Game Week 1?
I think Havertz is certainly an option, and the positive, I suppose, is you can maybe give him a little bit of an excuse for the poor output when he was playing left center mid at the start of the season, because he's a new player trying to get integrated to the team. So it might be the case that we're looking a little bit too unfairly in his time as a left center mid. But yeah, with Jesus being fit and Arteta being extremely appreciative of how good he looks in the preseason, I think you'll look at a fixture like Wolves at home and think that Jesus starts, but then Havertz can still play 25-30 minutes of football as the center forward, which he has in the preseason, right? Like every second half, I think he's basically been the striker whenever Jesus has come off. So I think the minutes are there for Havertz, but then the question is, do you think the balance between him playing center forward and left center mid are good enough for him to land into your team? For me right now, I think it's not, but I do like Havertz.
Yeah. And Beerman, says those 5.5s are key this season. Yeah, I agree. If you're going to go for Haaland, I think you do have to nail your budget picks. And I think someone like Cool can definitely do that. And if you get that budget forward, or someone like Smith Rowe you mentioned, I'm not totally locked in on my team yet. I'm still honestly going back and forth, Salah and Haaland. So I've got like the combinations here. So let me know in chat, left or right. These are basically the combinations, whether I go Salah or Haaland. So it's Munoz, Cannon, he's on the bench, Salah, Vardy, and Alisson, or João Pedro, Haaland, Rodgers, Konsa, and Henderson. So left or right, what do you guys think in chat? It's super close, and again, like, you're a really analytical manager, and if you look on FPL Review and those sorts of sites, it's got the 2 paths as basically dead even, which shows just how well they've priced the players. There's no like clear, obvious better plan where there's more EV on the table. Chat's very divided in terms of left or right, but maybe this is like Salah versus Haaland owners. Left by far. Well, left is the Salah option. I mean, I know your answer would be right, Fran. I mean, if this is the players that I would change if I was going for Salah myself. Yours might look different though. But,
yeah, I mean, to be fair though, I think you're right, because your point that a Salah only draft looks as competitive as a Haaland draft is true. I guess at that point you just have to be making a decision as a manager. Who do you prefer having, and how much do you care about those sort of early captaincy swings? Because if you look at a Haaland only draft, the weakness, I suppose, is in Game Week 5, where you don't really have a great captaincy. Whereas with Salah, you're going to have an inferior captaincy in Game Week 2, but no real issues after that.
What worries me as well, I look at these Liverpool fixtures, and there's so many players that the goals and assists can come from. And I know Salah's Salah, and we might just see much more of the same, but there's lots of sources to points there. But when you look at something like Man City home to Ipswich, you can easily see him being the centre of absolutely everything and just, bagging a hat-trick in the first half sort of thing. So I suppose that's at the back of my head as well. Haaland's certainly more explosive. Over the season, I reckon they score similarly, as we saw on the points projections according to the market. Chat's pretty divided. 57% reckon left, which is the Salah one. 43% right. Yeah, I'm not looking forward to having to decide which one to lock in. What I will say, by the way, and I hate that this is the case, but if there's a leak on Trent, it could be absolutely pivotal in terms of which way I go.
Great point. Yeah.
Like, imagine we get... So he's not played in pre-season yet. Hopefully he does in their final game tomorrow. They've got like 2 games at the same time, I think, or close together tomorrow, and it might be like A team and B team. And imagine it's the A team and Bradley's there in right back, and then the B team's got Trent there. So if there's like no leak at all, that's a massive dilemma. Do you go Trent, or let me know in chat, especially if you're a Liverpool fan. Do you think Trent starts Game Week 1 straight in, or do you think Bradley on his pre-season form gets that spot? But yeah, again, like, imagine there's a leak just before the deadline that Trent's not expected to start Game Week 1. I think that blows it wide open. Suddenly I think like my Salah draft might be a Haaland draft. That's the sort of tipping point, I think. What are your thoughts on that and Trent?
That's a good point. I've been actually just thinking about whether Trent might just be benched for the Ipswich game. And it's not nothing about Slot's preferences, but just about the lack of preseason minutes, even if he starts, as you said, for the B team potentially tomorrow. So that is a genuine concern. I think, given that I'm already on a Haaland draft, it's just a simple move to, let's say, going Guardiola and Gabriel, and then having a really big at the back team. I'd probably drop Munoz and Trent in that situation, and keep Porro. But I think that's the only changes that I'd make on my draft, and I have considered it because it's not great to put so much money into Trent, and it's not, I wouldn't say he's essential. Maybe that's a hot take, but I'm willing to go without Trent, and the preseason is the reason why.
Yeah, it's a difficult one, isn't it? I think he's immense for 7 mil, like his cheapest price in about 5 years. But yeah, like if he's a massive doubt to start Game Week 1, there's a few ways you can go there. You can go all the way down to a cheap defender, or like you say, you could go Vardy, Gabriel, Porro back 3. Actually, I want to ask you about Porro. So Leicester Game Week 1, so I can see why you've got him. Then it's a home fixture, but he does have Newcastle away, then Arsenal home, and it wasn't like they were keeping loads of clean sheets last season. So he got 3 goals, 8 assists, 7 clean sheets. What's the thinking with the Porro pick?
Yeah, I think it's really just how attacking he is as a player. So we saw, I think with Peter, FPL Teams changes that he lost around 10 bonus. So I think the impact of that was something like 7% of his points were removed from the game. Going forwards, though, you'd still think Maddison's minutes are not perfect, so he should still have set pieces for 20, 30 minutes a game, 15 almost. On top of that, as I said, I kind of like the idea of going for Barco to potentially cover the Arsenal one, because even if I was to, let's say, look at Guardiola or Gabriel, they've got some poor fixtures too. Like, I wouldn't expect too much from Arsenal defense, despite them being clearly the best defense in the world, versus Tottenham and City as the 2 key games. But then also I'm neglecting Aston Villa in Game Week 2. So I think all the premiums except for Trent actually have some pretty poor games, and I'm willing to go for Porro because his minutes are also there. I don't know if you have any concerns about Gabriel and his minutes with Calafiori. Probably not, but
no, not for me. I don't think Arteta changes anything. So White will be right back for a long while, I think. Saliba and Gabriel, I don't see him changing that either. Calafiori, I don't actually think he's been involved in pre-season. He wasn't in the squad the other day. I think he'll be probably used in left back more than anything. He can play left centre back as well, so I'm sure Arteta does do that at some point later down the line. But I just can't see him changing what worked so effectively last season. And really, if you look at our defence, the criticism people will have is Zinchenko, which is why we saw him dropped and we saw Kiwior and Tomiyasu used in left back a lot. So yeah, Calafiori is really highly rated. I can't honestly say I'd watched him play before, but he's incredibly highly rated and a few teams are in for him. So I think that's how the back four will look. Maybe later in the line we'll see it change, but you know, Gabriel does have the odd mistake in him. But he's barely 10% owned. Like, I did a differentials video and it's crazy how low owned he is, whereas Saliba's like three or four times the ownership. So yeah, I'm surprised by that because Gabriel's the one. But yeah, Porro, like, you can easily plan for his difficult fixtures. He scored a few times in pre-season, super attacking. I think he's worth the 0.5 over Udogie. And what I will say as well, people kind of forgot how well Spurs started last season, and then Van der Ven got that injury and it all kind of went off the rails for a little bit. So yeah, I think Porro is probably one of the locked in players. In fact, that's a good question for me to ask you here. Who are the locked in players now? We're what, a week? We're just over a week. 1 week and 11 minutes from the Gameweek 1 deadline. So which players are locked in for you here, Fran?
I think Nkunku, Isak, and I'm wavering a bit on Eze, but I'll say Saka's locked in. So those three.
Just those three. So what was it? Nkunku, Isak,
and Saka.
Eze, and Saka. Okay, so just 4 players. So yeah, you still might end up with Salah. Potentially.
Yeah, definitely. I think, you know, we're looking at Eze, a lot of people would say he's the one who's 100% locked, but then I'm just assuming that there could still be some transfer activity. And if Zaha comes in, I don't know if he might lose a bit of penalty share, that sort of thing. I'd still be looking into that because it's not like Crystal Palace have amazing games to start. They've got a couple good home ones, so United, West Ham, Leicester, for example. But I can see myself moving off of Eze if Zaha comes in, and I'm worried about that.
It's interesting. Are they being linked with Eze then?
I think so. I think Zaha's been linked with both Leicester and Crystal Palace, but Leicester just signed.
That'd be an interesting signing because yeah, he was Palace through and through, wasn't he? Once upon a time. Yeah, okay, interesting. Any concerns about Elise leaving, by the way, and Mateta coming back from the Olympics late?
Yeah, I think with Mateta probably less so because I think a report that I read suggested that he's still going to come back into the team for Game Week 1. He might not start, but I think he'll be fit as soon as Game Week 2 to start games. Because you also have to think that he wasn't actually involved within the Euros, so he would have been taking a vacation before eventually sort of joining up with the French U23 team for the Olympics. So I think in terms of Mateta, we won't see a super prolonged absence. As far as Elise, I think it's a fair point to make. I've looked at the numbers with and without Elise, but then you also have to contextualize that a lot of the minutes with Elise were under Glasner, so they obviously look really good, whereas the minutes without Elise were, a lot of them were sort of under Roy Hodgson, which you can argue that they were a completely different team under Hodgson versus Glasner. So hard to contextualize how important Elise is, but then they've also signed a couple players. They've got Sarr, Kamada, and then you have to imagine that they've at least tried to bridge the gap of, you know, how important Elise is as a loss.
We'll do a couple of more questions, so get them in the chat before we go. Panda GM says, what do you think about the Forest attack? I'm also interested, Fran, who do you think is the best 6 mil striker? I'd say the two that people are mostly looking for is Muniz and Wood. I've just seen Everton have just scored as I said that. I don't know if it was Calvert-Lewin, but he's the other 6 mil forward some people are looking at. How would you rank the 6 mil forwards?
I'd probably rank it Muniz, Wood, and Calvert-Lewin.
It was Calvert-Lewin that scored just now, you know. But yeah, I mean, he's too much of an injury risk for me. I would go Muniz, Wood, Calvert-Lewin, I would say.
I don't know if you've seen the data on his finishing, but somehow Calvert-Lewin apparently is the worst finisher in the league.
Is he really?
Yeah, just on sort of existing historical data, he has the worst finishing quality of all Premier League forwards somehow.
That's mind blowing. I'm just looking at his stats last season. Wow, yeah, 12.86 expected goals, and he scored 7 times. Do you remember the 2021 season under Ancelotti?
I do, yeah, because
Oh
James
my
was
God,
great as well, and everything
Yeah.
looked so good for them at that point in time, and you never would have thought that they'd be competing with relegation a few times after.
16 goals, 6 assists. He was good the year before as well, but yeah, it's just such an injury-prone player as well, so I don't plan to go there. Yeah, for me it's Muniz, Wood, and then Calvert-Lewin. In terms of the rest of the Forest attack, I think was the question. I think Hudson-Odoi is a good option, probably a bit more safe than Elanga, but they might get comparable minutes, and Gibbs White's the other one. Any of those tickle your fancy, Fran?
I was initially quite high on Gibbs White, but then over the course of the preseason, it seems like he's lost a lot of the set piece duties. Like I think Anderson, who they just signed, Elliot Anderson, that is, has been taking some of them. We've heard Elanga taking a few. So that's sort of taken the value out of Gibbs White for me, even though his minutes might be better than, let's say, Cho and Elanga. I do like my underlying stats. Hudson and Odoi somehow are extremely poor, so I'm not too high on any of the attackers that aren't Wood, even though Wood probably has more mins risks as well, because Taiwo is definitely a capable backup for now.
Agree with that. We'll stop there. Fran, thanks so much for your time, mate. Appreciate you chatting. Good to speak to you as always. Guys, if you're not subscribed to Fran, his channel is in the description, so go check him out. Makes absolutely elite content. Yeah, thanks very much for swinging by, Fran. Thanks everyone for tuning in. Lots of FPL videos to come next week, every day, every weekday, so make sure you subscribe for that. Fran, good to chat to you, mate.
Yep, thank you so much for having me on, and continue to watch Oscar's content because it's amazing.
Thanks very much. See you guys.